I walked into what I thought would be my promotion celebration and instead heard, "Surprise! Welcome to grad school, Leila." My sister had hijacked my party using my own $2,000. My mom leaned in. "We wanted to celebrate someone who really pushed through." I smiled. That night, I dismantled every financial connection between us. By morning, Leila's university registration was blocked, and by week's end, they received. What they did wasn't just wrong, it was calculated cruelty wrapped in family obligation. The kind of betrayal that doesn't scream in your face but smiles while twisting the knife deeper. I had been grinding in corporate purgatory for over 3 years, trapped in a job that promised nothing beyond fluorescent lighting and silent desperation. Nobody held my hand through the climb. Nobody coached me past the late nights and weekend emails. I clawed my way up with broken fingernails and coffee-stained shirts, surviving on spite and stubbornness when motivation failed me. When I finally earned that promotion and decent raise, I didn't expect a parade. I just wanted to celebrate with the people who mattered most. Something simple, family only. Maybe we'd order takeout, crack open a few beers in the backyard, nothing elaborate. Mom nodded like it made perfect sense. She even volunteered. "We'll take care of everything." A week later, she called saying they wanted to make it special, but money was tight. Without hesitation, I transferred $2,000 into her account. It felt stupid even then, but I convinced myself this was what families did for each other. The night of the party, I pulled into their driveway expecting maybe a congratulations banner or at least someone saying, "Hey, good job, Kurt." Instead, I saw gold streamers draped across the porch and a catering truck disappearing around the corner. Professional-grade decorations for what was supposed to be a backyard gathering. I walked through the front door carrying a store-bought cake, and before I could even set it down, the lights flipped on in coordinated chaos. "Surprise! Welcome to grad school, Leila." It didn't register immediately. I honestly thought they'd gotten the banner wrong, some mix-up with the printing company. Then I saw Leila emerge from the kitchen, already in tears, throwing herself into our parents' arms while aunts and uncles I'd barely recognized cheered from the sidelines. Everyone clapped. Someone popped champagne. My uncle started filming with his phone like this was a moment for the family archives. They had a custom playlist. They had a printed photo collage documenting her entire academic journey, complete with baby pictures and honor roll certificates. Not one person looked at me. Not one person asked how the promotion was going or even mentioned my name. I stood in the living room holding a cake that read, "Congrats, Kate." They'd somehow gotten my name wrong on my own celebration, while everyone raised their glasses to her future. My mom even delivered a speech about resilience, hard work, and unwavering family support. Then she looked directly at me and declared, "We wanted to celebrate someone who really pushed through." I said nothing. Just smiled and nodded like a good son should. But something fundamental shifted inside me that moment, like a gear clicking into a different setting. When I got back to my apartment, I didn't rage or cry or punch walls. I sat at my desk with the calm focus of a surgeon and logged into every account they were connected to. The tuition fund I'd established for Leila because she claimed she was terrified of student debt and couldn't handle taking out another loan, I closed it. Balance transferred to my personal savings. $0 remaining. The family phone plan I'd been subsidizing for 2 years, I removed myself, effective immediately. Every co-signed loan, every automatic payment, every financial thread connecting my resources to their needs, I severed with methodical precision. By the time the university emailed Leila about her blocked registration due to payment issues, I was already 6 moves ahead of their panic. They thought they could use me like an anonymous donor, someone too passive and grateful to push back against their manipulation. They were catastrophically wrong. But cutting off their money was just the appetizer. What I sent in the mail would be the main course that left them choking. The most infuriating part was how brazenly they flaunted what they'd done. Within days of the party, pictures flooded social media. My mom's Facebook caption read, "So proud of our future scholar. We always knew she'd make it." No mention of me anywhere. No acknowledgement that I'd funded their little celebration. It felt like watching someone steal your credit card, throw a party in your name, then tag you in the photos expecting gratitude for the privilege of being robbed. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with 2 envelopes, and the cold determination of someone who'd finally seen their family's true colors. The first envelope went to the university's financial aid office, formally notifying them that the expected tuition transfer for Leila Martinez was no longer authorized and that any future payments would require my explicit written consent. The second envelope, certified mail, signature required, was addressed to my father. Last year, he'd gifted me his old Toyota Camry with the lease still in his name, but the final payment promised by me. It was never really about transportation. It was about maintaining control through manufactured generosity. Time to cut that string too. The letter was professionally brief. I would not be making the final lease payment, and the vehicle would be returned by Friday. No emotional appeals, no angry accusations, just cold facts delivered with surgical precision. I didn't sign it with love or regret, just my name. I handed both envelopes to a courier service and settled in to wait. The silence was immediate and absolute. 3 days passed without a single text call, or even a passive-aggressive emoji. Just radio silence that felt like the calm before a Category 5 hurricane. I kept checking our family group chat, expecting someone to acknowledge the elephant in the room, but it remained eerily quiet except for Leila posting links to dorm furniture like nothing had changed. Then I received her text. One word. Why? I stared at that message for 5 full minutes, then placed my phone face down on the kitchen counter and walked away. Some questions don't deserve answers, especially from people who already know exactly what they did wrong. The next day, I showed up at my cousin Natalie's Memorial Day barbecue. She'd invited me weeks earlier, before everything imploded, and I needed to gauge the family's reaction through someone who might still be neutral. But even before I walked through her backyard gate, I could feel the shift in atmospheric pressure. People turned when they spotted me, not the welcoming kind of attention that says, "Glad you made it," but the wary surveillance that meant my name had been trending in conversations I wasn't part of. Aunt Janice could barely maintain eye contact. Uncle Rob greeted me like we never met before. No sign of Leila or my parents, just their absence hanging over the gathering like smoke. Natalie pulled me aside near the drink cooler, skipping pleasantries entirely. "They're saying you snapped," she informed me bluntly. "That you lost it because the party wasn't about you. That you cut them off over nothing." I didn't react, just studied her face for signs of where her loyalty lay. "You know how this family operates," she added. "They rewrite history fast." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know exactly how they operate." I could have explained everything: the stolen $2,000, the complete erasure of my achievement, the way they'd use me like a human ATM while expecting gratitude in return. But I didn't, because part of me wanted them to keep lying. I wanted them to feel safe in their revised narrative, to dig themselves deeper into their own mythology. Because they had no idea what else I'd already set in motion, or what was still coming their way. And when reality finally hit them like a freight train, they wouldn't be able to play victim anymore. The first signs of real panic didn't arrive with screaming phone calls or angry confrontations. Instead, it manifested as subtle shifts in the family ecosystem, a sudden halt to Leila's smug dormitory shopping updates, a conspicuous absence of celebration photos, an unnamed tension that seemed to infect every group text. Then came a photo of Leila sitting alone in their backyard with no caption and no smile, looking like someone had told her Santa Claus wasn't real. I knew exactly what was happening. Thursday morning was supposed to be her final registration deadline. I'd marked it on my calendar weeks ago, back when I still cared about her success. The university had flagged the missing tuition payment, frozen her account, and sent the first of several increasingly urgent warning emails. That payment had always been mine to make, the financial responsibility they'd assumed I would quietly handle like some anonymous scholarship fund. But assumptions have a way of crashing into reality. I made my morning coffee, sat on my balcony watching the sunrise, and waited for the inevitable meltdown. I expected panicked calls, desperate texts, maybe even a teary email apologizing for everything. But silence stretched on like a held breath. Friday afternoon, I drove to my father's office building and parked the Camry in the back lot. I locked it, left the keys with the receptionist along with a yellow sticky note reading, "For Martin Martinez," and walked away without explanation or argument. For me, it was closure. For them, it was the beginning of a new level of panic. That evening, Natalie called while I was making dinner. I could hear multiple voices in the background, like she was stepping out of a war room full of concerned relatives. "You should know," she began carefully. "They're completely losing their minds over there." I said nothing, just listened to the sounds of family chaos bleeding through her phone. "Your mom's telling everyone you've been acting strange since the promotion, That you're having some kind of breakdown. Of course. It was easier to paint me as mentally unstable than admit they'd destroyed something precious to me. They weren't just rewriting history, they were scrubbing their guilt from the narrative entirely. They're saying you ghosted them for no reason, she continued. But Kurt, you never even raised your voice. That's what's got everyone confused. That observation stuck with both of us, because I'd had every reason to scream, every justification to call them out publicly in front of the entire extended family. But I hadn't. I'd stayed quiet and moved through their world like a ghost with unfinished business. Sunday morning, I sat down and wrote them a letter. Not typed, not emailed, handwritten on real paper with a pen that left permanent marks. You took $2,000 from me under the pretense of celebrating something important to our family. Then you erased the actual reason for the gathering and made it entirely about Leila. You made me invisible in my own story, a supporting character in someone else's moment. I didn't sign it with love or even include my full name. I folded it carefully, sealed it in an envelope, and drove to their house to deliver it personally. The silence that followed felt different this time, heavier, more loaded with consequences. Days stretched into a week. The group chat remained dead. Even Natalie stopped sending updates. It was like I'd been surgically removed from their reality. Then, 2 weeks later, Uncle Rob called. He was my dad's older brother, the kind of man who only intervened when buildings were literally on fire. They're in serious trouble, he said without preamble. Leila's school deadline is about to hit. She's got no housing secured, no backup plan. They don't want to come to you directly, but they're running out of options. I asked him one crucial question. Did they tell you what actually happened? A long pause. They told me their version. That told me everything I needed to know. He explained they'd already approached 2 other relatives for emergency funding, but nobody wanted to touch a family loan after hearing whispers about drama and Kurt acting unstable. You could solve this with one phone call, Rob said, and he wasn't wrong. I could fix everything immediately. But not for free, and not without hearing the truth spoken out loud first. I'll think about it, I told him, and I meant it. Not because I was drunk on power, but because I needed them to understand they no longer held any over me. By the time I'd promised to consider helping, I already knew my exact conditions. They would have to say it out loud, not whispered through intermediaries or relatives, not buried in careful euphemisms, but stated clearly and directly. I was going to make them admit what they'd done. 3 more days passed before anything happened. Then Leila texted me. Can you help or not? Not. Hi. Not. Can we talk? Not even a pretense of politeness. Just a demand wrapped in entitlement, and seasoned with the same tone she'd used when casually asking for gas money, back when she had access to my credit card. I stared at that message for a full minute before deleting it without response. Then my mom called. I didn't answer, but she left a voicemail that revealed everything about their mindset. We're not going to beg, Kurt. But you know what this means for your sister. She's worked really hard. I don't understand why you're doing this. We've always supported each other. I replayed it twice just to appreciate how she'd completely glossed over the party, the stolen money, the way they'd erased me from my own celebration. That final line, "We've always supported each other," was particularly rich coming from someone who'd watched me subsidize this family for 3 years while taking credit for the generosity. Still, I didn't answer. I was waiting for something more substantial than manipulation disguised as concern. Then Aunt Lucia reached out. She's crying every night. Your mom's a complete mess. Your dad won't even discuss it. Can we all just sit down and talk this through? I met her for coffee the next day on neutral territory. She was clearly nervous, trying not to choose sides while obviously being fed up with the entire situation. I think they just didn't realize how deeply they hurt you, she said carefully. They thought you'd eventually get over it. I nodded. They always assume that. She reached into her purse and produced a sealed envelope. They didn't want to send this directly, but they asked me to give it to you. I opened it that evening at home. Inside was a handwritten note from Leila, the first time I'd seen her actual handwriting since high school graduation. I didn't ask for you to pay for anything. I didn't know you were funding the party. I was told it was Mom and Dad's gift to me. If I had known the truth, I would have stopped it. I swear. That part felt genuine, almost vulnerable. Then the manipulation kicked in. I know you're angry, but I desperately need help. If you can do this one thing for me, I'll pay everything back. I'll make it right. But she still didn't apologize. Neither did my parents. They wanted absolution without accountability, forgiveness without confession. So I called the university directly, and paid just enough to unlock her registration. Housing deposits? Additional fees? Not 1 cent beyond the bare minimum. Just enough to get her name back on the enrollment list, and nothing more. Then I called Rob and Lucia with my terms. I helped her. That's done. But if they want anything else from me, they speak to me directly. And next time, they start with "we were wrong." Not a negotiation, not a discussion, just those 3 words. They agreed to pass along the message, but I wasn't holding my breath for meaningful change. A few days later, something unexpected arrived in my mailbox. A formal invitation on thick cardstock with gold trim. Family dinner Sunday 6 p.m. No surprises this time. We promise. Inside was a handwritten note. We want to do this right. Come if you can. Love, Mom. I wasn't sure I was going to attend, but I kept the invitation in my jacket pocket, not because I'd forgiven them, but because for the first time in months, they were finally playing by my rules instead of their own. The invitation lived in my jacket pocket for 3 days while I debated whether this was genuine remorse or another elaborate manipulation. I kept checking it like the words might change, but it remained the same, formal, respectful, almost apologetic in its restraint. I didn't tell anyone about my decision. Sunday evening around 5:45, I drove over and parked several houses away from their driveway. Multiple cars were there, Dad's truck, Mom's SUV, Leila's borrowed Prius, a couple vehicles I didn't recognize. For a moment, I almost drove away. Then I remembered the look on Mom's face when she'd announced they wanted to celebrate. Someone who really pushed through, while erasing my achievement entirely. I rang the doorbell instead of using my key. Dad answered, and he looked older somehow. Maybe it was the lighting, or maybe I was seeing him without the filter of childhood intimidation. The man who'd always seemed 10 feet tall now appeared remarkably ordinary. He didn't say anything at first, just nodded and stepped aside. The dining room had been set like Thanksgiving, table extended to its limit, real candles, actual silverware instead of paper plates. Leila was already seated at the far end, her eyes darting up nervously like she hadn't expected me to actually show up. Mom emerged from the kitchen wiping her hands on a towel, looking like she'd been orchestrating a peace treaty rather than just preparing dinner. Nobody spoke for several long seconds. Then Mom smiled, not broadly, not smugly, just tired. I'm glad you came. I nodded. Let's eat. We went through the motions of normal family dinner, chicken parmesan, salad, warm bread, polite conversation about nothing important. Except the atmosphere was anything but normal. Every topic got carefully navigated around the obvious elephant in the room. Leila mentioned a professor she liked. Dad talked about fixing the gutters. Mom kept refilling wine glasses and asking if anyone needed seconds. Then Mom cleared her throat with obvious intention. Kurt, she said, we owe you an apology. The room went completely silent. For what happened? The party, everything after. We should have been honest about what it was from the beginning. You deserved so much better. I didn't respond immediately, just watched her face for signs of performance versus genuine regret. The pause stretched uncomfortably long. Then Leila added, I honestly didn't know. I really didn't. But I should have asked more questions instead of just accepting what I was told. I waited, watching my father. Finally, he looked directly at me and said the exact words I'd demanded. We were wrong. It didn't fix everything, but something shifted in the air, like a pressure valve releasing steam that had been building for months. I could feel everyone exhale slightly. Mom slid a small box across the table. I didn't open it immediately, studying her expression first. She looked nervous, not manipulative. Nobody was performing anymore. Inside was a watch, not flashy or expensive, just clean and classic. Engraved on the back were 3 simple words. You earned this. It wasn't about the money or even the watch itself. It was the first gift they'd given me that didn't feel like a chain around my ankle. I wasn't trying to destroy everything, I said quietly. I just wanted you to understand what it felt like to be erased. Dad nodded slowly. We understand now. No one made excuses. No one cried or begged forgiveness. It wasn't a movie ending with dramatic music and tearful embraces. It was still raw, still awkward in places, but something fundamental had changed. As I put on my jacket to leave, Mom hugged me. I didn't reciprocate immediately, just stood there processing the moment. Then I let it happen. You coming next weekend? She asked. Depends, I said. What's the occasion? She smiled. Nothing special. Just dinner. And for the first time in years, I actually believed her. A week later, I showed up for dinner without any formal invitation. No big speeches this time, no ceremonial apologies, just my parents, Leila, and a pan of lasagna that looked like it had been simmering with hope since morning. The house felt different, less like a trap, more like what it should have been all along. Quiet, lived in, comfortable in its imperfections. Leila was sitting at the kitchen counter scrolling through her phone. She nodded when I walked in, no forced smile, no fake energy, just a simple acknowledgement that said, I get it now. We ate in the living room with plates balanced on our laps, forks scraping against ceramic in comfortable rhythm. No one had dressed up for the occasion. Dad didn't even change out of his work boots. We talked about mundane things, gas prices, the need for new tires, whether the neighbor's fence was actually on their property line. Leila mentioned that one of her professors had offered her a paid summer internship. I told her to take it, even if it didn't pay well initially. Experience matters more than money when you're starting out. At one point, Mom asked if I could help her figure out the online banking app that had been confusing her for months. I showed her where to click, what buttons to press. Nothing more complicated than that. No lecture about financial responsibility. No sarcasm about finally learning basic technology. Then Dad asked, You doing all right on your end? Yeah, I said simply. He nodded like that was sufficient, like he wasn't entitled to deeper details about my life just because we shared DNA. They didn't realize it, but those few words meant more than any of the formal apologies, elaborate dinners, or engraved gifts. They weren't trying to extract anything from me or manage my emotions for their comfort. They were just checking in like people do when they actually care about each other. For the first time in years, they were seeing me as a person instead of a resource. Later, while we were washing dishes together, Leila pulled me aside. I'm going to pay back the tuition money, she said quietly. Not all at once, I can't afford that. But I will. I didn't argue or wave it off. I just nodded, because the truth was I didn't need the money returned. What I needed was this. A moment where everything wasn't filtered through guilt or manipulation, where I wasn't the family's emergency fund with legs. A moment where they finally understood the true cost of what they'd taken from me, not just the money, but the trust. When I left that night, I didn't make a big production of saying goodbye. Just gave a casual wave and stepped out into the cool evening air. I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated. I felt something better, finished. Not in a bitter way, not like I was walking away forever, but finished carrying the version of myself they'd been forcing on me for years. And for once, they were the ones left hoping I'd come back on my own terms. Update. 3 weeks had passed since that quiet dinner, and I hadn't returned to the house since. Not from avoidance. Life had simply started moving forward again. The promotion was fully in effect, work felt different now, like I actually had a voice that people listened to. My phone buzzed less with family emergencies and more with friends making weekend plans, coworkers discussing projects that mattered. Things felt normal for the first time in years. Then a plain white envelope appeared in my mailbox with no return address, just Kurt Martinez, typed on a label like it had been printed in some anonymous office. I assumed it was a bank statement or credit card PIN, something mundane and forgettable. I opened it at my kitchen counter, and inside was a single folded piece of paper with one line of typed text at the top. You should see what Leila did. Below it was a screenshot from a private Facebook group for local graduate students. Leila had posted a long rant weeks earlier, maybe even before our reconciliation dinner, about her toxic brother, who had sabotaged her education because he couldn't handle not being the center of attention. She didn't use my name, but every detail was unmistakably about me, my job, the party, the money, even pointed digs about people who pretend to be generous just to control others. The worst part was the response. Dozens of supportive comments, heart emojis, messages validating her victim narrative. No one had questioned her version of events. I sat down and read it 3 more times, each pass making my stomach sink deeper. This wasn't from the height of our conflict. This was recent. After the letter, after the university payment, after the dinner with the engraved watch and the "We were wrong" apologies. She'd been maintaining this lie even while looking me in the eye and thanking me for my help. The envelope bore no signature, no return address, no identifying marks. Someone had sent it anonymously, someone who wanted me to see the truth behind the performance. I read that Facebook thread 6 times before closing my laptop. Part of me wanted to screenshot everything and send it to my parents, to Rob and Lucia, to anyone who defended her during our family crisis. Another part of me imagined confronting Leila directly, asking how she could sit across from me at dinner, apologize with apparent sincerity, then immediately return to social media to paint me as an abusive manipulator. But I didn't do either of those things. Instead, I sat in silence for over an hour, then went for a long walk without my phone. Halfway through the park, I realized what was really eating at me wasn't the post itself, or even the fact that strangers believed her lies. It was that I'd let my guard down. That I'd wanted so desperately for things to be different that I'd convinced myself they already were. Maybe that hurt worse than anything they'd ever done to me, the realization that I'd been naive enough to believe the apologies were genuine. That night, I didn't send screenshots or make accusations. I didn't bring it up in any group chats or forward the evidence to concerned relatives. I let them keep their comfortable fiction. But I quietly changed the passwords on any remaining shared accounts, tightened my credit monitoring alerts, and checked for any lingering financial connections between us. There weren't many left, just a few forgotten digital footprints, some old login credentials from years past. I erased all of them. A few days later, Leila texted me a meme, something stupid and unrelated, like we were still in the phase of pretending everything was fine. I didn't respond. Because here's what I'd finally learned. I wasn't going to teach them another lesson. I wasn't going to make them understand the depth of their betrayal or the complexity of my disappointment. I was done playing referee in a game where the rules changed every time I started winning. No more second chances. No more quiet warnings. No more hope for genuine change. Let them keep their story. I was done writing it for them. This time, when I walked away, it would be permanent. Not out of anger or spite, but from the quiet wisdom that comes from finally recognizing when someone has shown you exactly who they are, and choosing to believe them,